Look around the room you're in. The phone in your pocket, the car in your driveway, the satellite passing overhead, the chip training the AI that just answered your question. Every one of these things, every smartphone, every electric vehicle, every radar dish, every advanced weapon, every artificial intelligence chip on Earth, depends on a soft, silver-blue metal that you have probably never thought about. It is called gallium. You cannot buy it at a hardware store. You will never see it. It melts in your hand. And 98% of the world's supply comes from one country. That country has just turned off the tap. Gallium does not exist on its own in nature. It is pulled in tiny quantities from the waste streams of aluminum and zinc refining. The world produces only about 700 metric tons of it every year, a rounding error compared to copper or nickel. But what gallium lacks in volume, it makes up for in power. When you fuse gallium with arsenic, you get gallium arsenide, a semiconductor that switches signals faster than silicon ever could. It is what allows your phone to find a 5G tower. It is what allows the GPS satellite above you to whisper your location down to within a few feet. When you fuse gallium with nitrogen, you get gallium nitride, and that is where things get serious. Gallium nitride can handle voltages, frequencies, and temperatures that would melt an ordinary chip. It is the reason an LED light bulb lasts 20 years. It is the reason an electric vehicle charger can deliver hundreds of kilowatts without bursting into flames. And it is the reason the most advanced radar in the United States military can see a stealth drone 200 miles away. The American defense establishment did not stumble onto gallium by accident. The Pentagon's research arm, DARPA, spent decades and hundreds of millions of dollars perfecting it. Today, gallium nitride sits inside the radar of the F-35 stealth fighter. It powers the new Patriot missile defense system. It guides terminal high-altitude area defense interceptors. It is in dozens of warships, electronic warfare pods, and next-generation jammers. If silicon was the metal of the 20th century, gallium is becoming the metal of the 21st. There is just one problem. The United States produces 0 pounds of it. For most of the last 40 years, gallium was an afterthought, a byproduct, a specialty material handled by a handful of refiners scattered across Germany, Japan, Hungary, and Kazakhstan. Then China noticed. Beginning in the early 2000s, Chinese state-linked firms began doing what they had already done with rare earth elements, with solar panels, with lithium batteries. They invested heavily. They subsidized aggressively. They pushed prices below what foreign competitors could survive. One by one, the foreign refiners shut down. By the time the rest of the world looked up, China was producing 98% of the world's low-purity gallium. The United States, the country that had invented most of the applications, was 100% reliant on imports. It was on paper just commerce. In reality, it was leverage. In July of 2023, China revealed what that leverage looked like. Citing national security, Beijing's Ministry of Commerce announced that exporters of gallium would now require a license. Officials said the policy did not target any specific country, but the message landed in Washington with the force of a thunderclap. Within weeks, the European spot price of gallium jumped 43%. By early 2024, prices outside China were nearly double prices inside. That was the warning shot. In December of 2024, the actual shot was fired. After the United States added 140 Chinese semiconductor firms to its export blacklist, China responded the very next day with a near-total ban on gallium exports to the United States. The clause was unprecedented. It claimed extraterritorial reach, meaning a refiner in Belgium or Japan that resold Chinese gallium to an American buyer could be prosecuted under Chinese law. The doors didn't just close, they were welded shut. The effects were immediate, and they spread. By May of 2025, gallium prices in the European port of Rotterdam had reached $687 per kilogram, more than 150% above pre-control levels. Some grades climbed by 365%. Exports of unwrought gallium from China stayed near zero for the entire year. The United States Geological Survey ran the numbers. A complete and sustained Chinese ban on gallium and germanium, it concluded, could erase between $3.5 and $9 billion from American gross domestic product. But the dollar figure misses the deeper story. You cannot easily substitute gallium nitride. You cannot just swap in silicon and call it a day. A radar built around gallium components has to be redesigned, retested, recertified. A satellite power system has to be requalified for spaceflight. An F-35 radar upgrade, the program known as Block 4, was already running years behind schedule. Without a stable supply of gallium, every defense program built on top of it is exposed. The civilian economy is exposed too. The world's largest chip makers, NVIDIA, Infineon, Power Integrations, Navitas, onsemi, have spent the last 2 years racing to build a new generation of AI data centers around gallium nitride power chips. The reason is brutally simple. A modern AI training cluster can consume more electricity than a small city. Gallium nitride converts that electricity at efficiencies above 98%. Silicon cannot keep up. If gallium gets squeezed, the AI build-out, the single largest infrastructure project in modern American history, slows down with it. In late October of 2025, on the sidelines of an Asian summit, the President of the United States and the President of China sat down to talk. The deal that emerged was framed as a truce. China agreed to suspend the most aggressive of its export controls. On November 7th, Beijing announced that the gallium ban, along with the bans on germanium and antimony, would be paused until November of 2026. In Washington, some observers exhaled. The headlines moved on, but read the fine print and the picture changes. The ban was not lifted. It was suspended. The licensing regime stayed in place. The clause prohibiting exports to American military end users stayed active. China retained in writing the right to flip the switch back at any time. What had been a weapon was now a leash. This is the new shape of economic power, not tariffs, not sanctions. A licensing form on a bureaucrat's desk in Beijing, a general license that can be issued one quarter and quietly denied the next. Leverage that does not need to be used to be felt. Western officials are now openly calling this what it is, economic deterrence, and admitting that the leverage runs in only one direction. So what is the world doing about it? Slowly, and at enormous cost, it is trying to rebuild. In the United States, the Department of Defense has begun funding gallium recovery projects, pulling the metal from the waste streams of domestic aluminum smelters. A facility in Oklahoma is preparing to come online. Another in Tennessee is being studied. Recycling programs are expanding. Australian and Canadian miners are exploring deposits that no one previously bothered to develop. The European Union has classified gallium as a strategic raw material under its Critical Raw Materials Act, with mandatory diversification targets by 2030. Japan and South Korea, which felt the pinch nearly as hard as the United States, are subsidizing their own refiners. But here's the uncomfortable arithmetic. Building a new gallium refinery is not like switching on a factory. It takes years of permitting, years of construction, and a workforce that, in most Western countries, no longer exists. Even the most optimistic projections do not have non-Chinese supply meeting global demand before the early 2030s. In the meantime, every smartphone, every electric vehicle, every radar, every satellite, every AI accelerator built in those years will still depend, somewhere along its supply chain, on a metal that flows through one country's gates. Empires used to be measured in armies, then in oil, then in microchips. The next measure is already here, hidden in the materials those microchips are made of, in the gallium that switches the radar, in the germanium that carries the signal, in the rare earth that spins the motor. A country does not need to fire a shot to shape another country's future. It only needs to control the inputs. China understood this earlier than anyone else. It spent 30 quiet years buying up the inputs while the rest of the world was distracted by the outputs. The gallium suspension is not the end of the story. It is the moment the rest of us realize the story had been going on for decades. The metal in your phone, the metal in your car, the metal in the chip training the future. It is not and has not been ours. The question now, For the United States, for Europe, for every economy that thought it had won the technology race, is whether the next 30 years can be spent winning back what the last 30 quietly gave away.